Hi, so I'm going to talk about this masterpiece by George Seurat and some of the composition principles and sort of a deconstruction of his genius of how he composes space and sort of get a little bit away from the art historian talk of the narrative and the um, impressionist light and unpack a little bit about what some of the things people mean when they say George Seurat is a little more of a classicist, and I'm going to get into that by just his rigorous structure of the spatial organization, the composition, and all the ways that he is kind of like a clockwork maker, a mathematician, a wizard, a scientist, and just get into that in a little bit more detail and just show you some basic composition principles that he just kind of takes to an nth degree, much like a Renaissance painter or an architect. So I'm going to start off by showing you the main diagonals, and basically what these are classic composition lines of how to divide any rectangle, and these are essential for finding your main proportions and main points of interest, such as these keystone intersections right here, the center. Then we have some more intersections here which create fourths, and as you can see there's things such as this tree which line up on the fourths, and then you have these large diagonals which George Seurat, if you can look around the painting for a minute, you can see where he repeats the diagonals, such as I'm going to click on the picture over here, this diagonal echoing that, and see if we can find some more just obvious areas. And that's what I was talking about with that tree intersecting that point right there, this figure right here, right along that central axis. Even the way this man is leaning is responding to that diagonal. So this main construction of diagonals is not something I'm just making up, but it's just kind of a classic way of dividing a rectangle, and it creates a dynamism and an energy within which artists such as Seurat and early Renaissance painters Piero della Francesca and Leonardo da Vinci, ancient Egyptian artists, and kind of anyone who's trained in the visual arts uses this framework. And let me move on to the next thing that this framework does in dividing up space. Well, this is basically just the thirds, division of thirds, which classic composition uses over and over again to organize space. And here we can see this figure in the keystone in the lower left quadrant, right on the third division. And then we see also, let me click on that over there, this figure right on the third division, and this head sliced right on the third division. And then we have within this division of thirds, we also have kind of pictures within pictures, sort of block out the rest of the painting. Look at this composition just in this quadrant. Really beautiful construction of space right in there. And there's even a beautiful painting in these two quadrants. And it just kind of goes to show you that a master like this is thinking about basic divisions of space, and we're going to get into a little more detail of how far he takes these divisions. So I'm going to show you these diagonals again, and as I pointed out, these keystone intersections are where the divisions of thirds can be placed, and there's another set right here which is the division of fourths. And I know I just threw a ton of lines on there, so I'm going to get that out of the way for a second and try to visualize those fourths. It's kind of like another musical layer of notes and harmonies and melodies layered on top of the thirds within this entire rectangle. And within the fourths, there's just another mathematician at work here trying to create patterns and rhythms and movements. And that's kind of more of what some of the art historians who understand what they're saying when they talk about George Seurat being a classicist, more so than a lot of impressionists, is that he's constructing his space based on sort of rigorous principles that have been around since ancient Greece, and he references that his work is similar to even an ancient architect designing the Parthenon or something like that. And yeah, forgive me for not knowing too much of what I'm talking about there, but as you can see, when you look at some other Impressionist works that's a little more haphazard, and I'm not going to go into that whole discussion right now, but there's just a rigorous clockwork maker going on in here. A scientist, a pattern maker, a textile designer. You have a mathematician who's just like clockwork, finding intervals, proportions, and that's a little bit more of what separates Seurat from some of the other Impressionists, minus Degas, who's a little bit more in the same realm. But I'm going to get into what these fourths are doing. So here's the thirds here, but the fourths makes a quadrant for these two main figures, and it also slices this man directly and kind of highlights this lower quadrant where his face is. There's some other things that the fourths do that the thirds don't do, such as this tree relating to that figure kind of bang on that line right there, and this figure here sliced directly in half, the shadow line directly on the fourth interval. So what he's doing is he's making another set of intervals within which to find more patterns, more harmonies, more proportional relationships that kind of make this masterwork just a never-ending visual experience. And let's move on to just a simpler division than the fourths, which is rebattement, and that is just taking the rectangle, the entire rectangle, and creating a square based on the first side of the rectangle. So we're taking this side and then we're just doubling, not doubling, but making it exactly the same width here. And we'll notice that that's kind of cluing us in to what we just talked about in the thirds. And you notice that those are, the rebatment is actually on the thirds, and that's because this painting is a 80 by 120 inch painting, roughly. I think it's 81 by 122 inch. And if you do the math breakdown of that, 8 by 12, it reduces to 4 by 6, and 4 by 6 reduces to 2 by 3. And here's the 2 by 3 breakdown. And this is just another layer of intervals that obviously conceived by someone who's this great of an architect and designer. And from the 2 by 3 we move up to a 4 by 6, and then within this 4 by 6 we have more intervals, which I'll highlight a couple. The bottom of his ear even running exactly along the 4 by 6 interval, bottom of the head, and there's another set of patterns and relationships. This man is just a kind of hinge point to this whole lower edge of the painting. If he wasn't there, this painting would kind of fall off in this lower quadrant. He's kind of a critical figure, and there's just more things going on. This figure bang on the edge of that quadrant of the 4 by 6 division. So another set of patterns here that just trying to open you up to see some of the genius that's going on here. And then there's the full 8 by 12 division, which is just an insane amount of squares. But even just take a moment, block out the entire painting, look in this single square right here. Look at the composition there. What a beautiful, there's 8 by 12 is 144. There's almost 144 individual paintings in here. Look at the composition within, let me get the red marker here. Oh, look at the composition even within this quadrant. Another picture within a picture. Just an incredible painter at work here. And let me just get back to the original painting. A whole nother layer going on in here as an artist this great is working is the golden ratio, which kind of a lot of people talk about this golden ratio. I just want to dissect and deconstruct how Seurat uses the golden ratio real quick. And the basic breakdown of the golden ratio is this, and that I'm going to highlight what this means real quick. That's no good. So from here, let me click on the edge of from here, this proportion here is a golden ratio in relation to that. So this is 1 to 0.618. So that's the golden ratio. And look what Seurat does with these golden ratios, and likewise this is a golden ratio here. So that's 0.618, and then this is 1, so 1 to 0.618. Let me get rid of those marks and show you the framework of the golden ratio, and these are the key golden points. Much like the rule of thirds, but divided instead of thirds by golden ratio divisions. He's got the hand exactly on the edge of this golden ratio. This hat, the bottom of that man's head on that golden ratio. This umbrella getting sliced, this hovering right above that golden ratio. There's many golden ratios within golden ratios. Let me get rid of that squiggly line. Here's a golden rectangle, or a square and a rectangle division, which mimics the whole. That's actually just 2 by 3, not a golden ratio, but another picture within a picture there, and just beautiful architect at work. I'm going to get into a little deeper level of what these golden ratios are doing in the horizontal divisions. Get rid of those. All of those are golden ratios. Every single interval here, a whole nother layer to this masterwork. Let me dissect the verticals. Those are all golden ratios as well. And again, so this is, click on the photo over here, this is 1, and that's 0.618. It's just mathematician at work, unbelievable. That's 1, that's 0.618. This one actually looks a little off. I don't know if I got that correct, but I have a set of golden ratio calipers. I'm going to double check this real quick on my screen. That actually, the golden ratio here comes to that shadow line. So I misdrew that, and I'll erase the top edge of this. So that's another golden ratio, and you can kind of keep finding them on the microscopic level, even in areas like if you look deeper into these small negative spaces, and it's just a master of proportion, organization, spatial relationship. I'm going to get rid of that and call the video right there, and just wanted to open you up to some of the classical composition within this so-called impressionist, post-impressionist master. And thanks so much for listening.